Alright, so here's some tribal synergy talk, and the reason Metaverse is on your screen right now is because both of the decks involved in tribal synergy, both of the archetypes I should say, which is Amazoness and Harpy, they both use a field spell, Amazoness Village and Harpy's Hunting Ground respectively. And Metaverse turbos out field spells, as we've already seen with both Unions and Magnet Warriors. It's a pretty good card when your deck has a powerful field spell to be built around. Now, Tribal Synergy, for those of you who may not know, since it's never really seen competitive play, or at least not for a long time, it reveals an Amazoness and Harpy monster to draw 1, and if you control one of each of those monsters, it's Pot of Greed. It's actually better than Pot of Greed because you don't have to actually use a card to draw 2, you just straight up draw 2. So each of those skills can only be used once per duel, so that's the balance. What's the primary issue with Tribal Synergy, Justice?
So, the thing about me is I absolutely love drawing cards. It's just a great feeling. It feels so good. And when you tell me, hey, you know what? You can Pot of Greed, except that instead of a +1, it's a +2. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm in love. The thing is about drawing cards is when you draw those cards, you want them to be good. And that's kind of where we run into an issue with Tribal Synergy, is that when we're running all those Harpy and Amazoness cards, they're not particularly great. So you could tell me that I get to, draw 4 and it still might not be good enough to use.
Yeah, and if you were like me and you were hoping for some good Amazoness or Harpy cards in the box, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. And that is that there were 0, correct me if I'm wrong, new Amazoness cards, 0.
I believe that is correct.
And there was exactly 1 Harpy card, and it appears on your screen right now, and that is Cyber Harpy Lady. Now, yes, it is strong. It's 1800, which means with the field spell, Harpy's Hunting Ground, it gets boosted to 2000, which is a good normal summon, right? Which also pops a back row because of the field spell. What's the only problem, you might ask? I'll ask you again. What's the only problem with Cyber Harpy Lady?
Yeah, what does it do?
It's always treated as Harpy Lady, whether it's in your hand, your deck, or on your field.
That's great. That is sure to interrupt all of my opponent's plans.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So the problem with Cyber Harpy Lady is, 1, it does absolutely nothing beneficial right now. And the second one is, all the other Harpy Lady cards we have, which is 1, 2, and 3, also are always treated as Harpy Lady. So you run into the exact same problem, which is that you can only run 3 of them combined. So if you run 3 Cyber Harpy Ladies, you are not running any other Harpies unless you decide to play dead draw brick cards like Elegant Egotist and Harpy Lady Sisters, which I would not recommend.
I mean, at this point, I'm pretty sure that our goal is not exactly winning anyway, so I don't go for it. Really.
Yeah. Why not goes for it? And as far as the Amazoness side goes, I suppose you could argue that Reinforcement of the Army does help you search any of the Amazoness monsters, but like with drawing cards, searching cards is cool, but you have to search high quality cards for it to actually mean something. So I'm sorry for those Harpy and Amazoness and My Valentine fans out there, but this probably, I can say with confidence, and I think you would agree, will not see competitive play.
Yeah, I strongly agree, and particularly given that despite the name of the skill, Harpies and Amazonesses have no inherent synergy. So not only are you running not super high quality cards, you're running a deck that's mashing 2 different strategies together for absolutely no benefit other than the one-time use of the skill.
Yeah. Other than drawing a maximum of 3 cards, where if you brick and you draw like a full Amazoness package or a full Harpy package, you just auto lose and you don't even get the pleasure of activating Pot of Greed, which is the whole point of the deck.
Right.
So, yep, that's all we got for this one. And speaking of Mai, let's actually transition smoothly from Mai to Joey and show you what he got.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to Joey, and we're going to start with the name of the skill. Now, normally we don't spend much time talking, about the names of the cards, not particularly relevant. However, we need to appreciate the flavor of this, because it's called I'm Just Gonna Attack, which I think is the most wonderful just personification of Joey, because the implication is he's sitting here thinking, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know. I'm just gonna attack. And it is just fantastic, and I love that they did this for Joey, because it is just everything about the character. And I love it.
That is Joey Wheeler, the character, in a nutshell. If ever a name of a skill could encompass that any better, I don't think that's possible. So, getting into the skill's effect, it does a couple things, neither of which are very good. So during the main phase, you make one monster you control gain 100 attack until an entire 100 attack points until the end of the turn. And then in the battle phase, if your opponent activates a trap card specifically, you negate its effect and set it back face down. Each can only be used once per turn. So it gives you 100 entire attack points and then negates battle traps, which are, as we've already established earlier in the video, not very good. So, I mean, yes, we got a lot of battle traps in the box. We got Widespread Ruin, we got Draining Shield, we got Magical Hats, but at the same time, we got cards to instantly make them completely like non-relevant as far as competitive plays go, like Breaker and Cosmic Cyclone and Jinzo and XYZ Dragon Cannon. So there's already so many answers to battle traps. This skill really doesn't matter, and it honestly, it never will in the future either. And I know, like, I love Joey, but he has got absolutely no love right now in this box.
See, this is where you and I differ, because you, as you well know, by far Seto Kaiba is my favorite character, so I have like nothing but contempt for Joey. So this actually makes me really happy. It's funny because, again, not just the name but the effect too. Like, it really does fit him. It really is just the look. I don't know. I just want to attack my monster, so I'm gonna. And like the 100 attack is hilarious, because it's obviously not a big boost at all. But it's like, well, if both our monsters have the same attack points, now mine is bigger. And if you try to do anything when I attack, I can stop it, and it's great. So like, this is a skill that obviously has no real competitive implications, but the flavor of it is absolutely fantastic. And honestly, I don't think it's a problem for the game to have some cards that are just really good flavor, because some people are still going to use them. Like, maybe not in a competitive tournament setting, but people will use this card, I promise, like in some random locals or something, just because they like it. And I think that's actually good for the game as a whole.
Yeah, for the memes. This is for the casual meme players out there. So if you're one of those, congratulations, you've got yourself an amazing skill to use. With that, let's actually move on to Odion, who we'll also have a deck for. Alright, so we've got 2 Odion skills that came in the box, and I'm going to actually read this like a manga, so I'm going to go right to left instead of left to right. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So you've got Endless Traps, which is a nerfed version of the dueling skill Endless Trap Hell. And the name is also nerfed, because obviously you can't put Hell on a card, which is something you pointed out to me, so that's pretty funny. And then the skill itself is, in Duel Links, it's you have the 3 traps in your graveyard. Although in Duel Links, I do believe it's 3 or more, right?
Yes, in Duel Links it's at least 3, here it's exactly 3.
Yeah, so the condition is more conditional. That's a cool thing to say. And then you randomly add 1 trap from those 3 to your hand, which is what Duel Links does as well. And then Duel Links will shuffle the rest of them into your deck, while this one only shuffles 1 of the remaining 2 into your deck, and it banishes the other one. So it's a straight nerf to Endless Trap Hell from Duel Links, which I find really funny, because our skills in speed duels are generally way more powerful than they are in Duel Links. I don't know. What do you think about nerfing it like that?
So it's funny, because I agree. Normally, the skills in speed dueling are stronger. Like, the only thing I would say that, like, Duel Links really gets that we don't is kind of like the searching skills, but that's just is what it is. So normally, yeah, we get skills that are really strong. So it's kind of funny that they felt the need to not only nerf it, but nerf a skill that is actually very rarely used in Duel Links in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, that skill's really good in Duel Links, so we need to, tone it down a little bit. It's barely used in Duel Links, and then they made it actually much worse.
Yeah. I'm honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and straight up say they made it unplayable. So
Agree.
I think it's unplayable, but that doesn't stop the other one from being playable, which is Guardians of the Tomb, and that's much better because it relies on trap monsters, which, as you may know if you watch the anime, is kind of Odion's thing. So that is when a monster is special summoned from your spell and trap zone during your opponent's main phase, and then you have to have no cards in your hand. You straight up draw a card in your opponent's main phase, and if it's a spell or trap, you can set it in that same opponent's main phase. So it's potentially a +1 every single turn, which actually gives this skill a lot of viability in, I'll say, go ahead and say, just in a format where Jinzo is not around that much. This can actually be a pretty terrifying skill in where your opponent is not only getting monsters on your turn, but also drawing cards on your turn.
Yeah, and that's really, really nice. Obviously, again, it does have the condition that you only get to draw if you have no cards in your hand, but honestly, I think that's probably reasonable, because if it didn't have that requirement, you just almost guarantee draw an extra card every turn, so probably good that it has that. But still, anything that lets you get card advantage every turn, I think is at least worth looking at, which we're going to do.
Yep. Look, speaking of looking at it, let's actually go right into a deck. Alright, so here's the full deck. Now, obviously, I took the most powerful attack point trap monsters, which is Swamp Mirror and Zoma. And I took the most powerful defense point trap monster, which is Meta Reflect Slime, and you've got 8 of those combined, so 2 slimes and 6 combined of the 1800 beaters. Now, Swamp Mirror, you do have to choose a type and an attribute, but it doesn't matter. Unless your opponent is running like Warrior Limb, then I guess don't pick Warrior. But other than that, it really doesn't matter what type you choose there. And for the rest of the deck, since you can go ahead and quick set your draw as long as it's a spell or trap, I think Nightmare Wheel is a decent fit, although this could really be anything, because Burn is also an alternate win con. But yeah, Nightmare Wheel could be anything. Offerings, I think, is good because it helps you meet your skill condition. If you use it, you skip your draw phase. Rhoda is to just search the Exiled Force, which is, along with Offerings, an answer to Jinzo. Blowback Dragon, tributes, it's just a tribute summon because you have a lot of trap monsters. You can run pretty much any tribute summon here, and that's the perfect segue into the side deck, where this is a card that you really like.
Yes, I love Kaiser Glider. It is something that we've actually tested in a few different decks now, and every time we've been like, wow, Kaiser Glider's really good. It accomplishes a few things. Just right now, in that we're in a meta with a lot of times it's about getting that one like big boss monster out, whether that be XYZ or Valkyrian, or just, tributing for a Blowback Dragon in Conflict's case. Getting to bounce their monster back to the hand once Kaiser Glider is destroyed is actually really valuable in a lot of situations. And other than that, the other effect, which is sometimes overlooked, is that it cannot be destroyed in battle with a monster that has the same attack. Well, what has the same attack? Jinzo has the same attack. So, and also turns off traps, which means that if you attack your Kaiser Glider into a Jinzo, Jinzo's destroyed, Kaiser Glider stays, which is amazing. Also, speaking of the XYZ matchup, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's XZ that has 2400 attack, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me confirm. Yes, it is.
Ooh, look at that. There you go. All right. So that is also something that it can run into. And then other common things are Blowback Dragon, which has 2300, so Kaiser Glider is actually just bigger than Blowback Dragon. So it actually is relevant in a lot of situations. In this particular deck, does it need to be main decked? It could be, depending on your meta read, your meta call. But if nothing else, the side deck I do think is a good place for it. Specifically for those matchups. Spellproof Armor, it's a really good matchup for. It actually can do work against Conflict, and as we talked about in the XYZ, it actually does some work there too. So it has actually quite a few matchups where it's pretty relevant.
Yeah, and one thing about the not being destroyed by battle by Jinzo or XC is that even if it's flipped face down by Book of Moon, the card text states that it cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster that has the same attack. It doesn't specify that it has to be in attack mode attacking into it. So they can't run over it with something with 2400, even if they were to flip Kaiser Glider face down first. So that's just another really cool interaction to point out with just the way it's worded and the way it works.
Right.
Yeah. So just the rest of the side deck is just more, you can play any tribute you want really. So Spell Cancer's in here in case you need to stop a deck that plays a lot of spells. I did not put Jinzo in here because there's no point in negating half of your own deck, because as Dueling Book will tell you here, you play 11 traps. So that's very, very anti-synergy to the point where your skill becomes unplayable. So any tribute except Jinzo. Put a little caveat on that.
There you go.
Yeah. Double Cyclone, just because you've got so many continuous back row that maybe consider Double Cyclone. Obviously, this is not optimized, so it can be whatever. And because you've got so many back row, your opponent is probably going to want to try to remove a lot of those as soon as they can, which makes this the perfect deck to run Waking the Dragon, with your 3 best targets obviously being Thousand Eyes Restrict, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, and Arcana Knight Joker. And then you've got your classic side deck card Lost Wind, and Quantum Cat is just another option for a trap monster, which I think we both agree is not as good as Meta Reflect Slime, and the effect just doesn't really do anything for this deck.
Right, yeah, I mean, there's nothing we have to take advantage of its effect, so it as you said, just becomes straight up a worse Meta Reflect Slime.
Yeah. And I will say for this skill has a lot of potential. Now I know these trap monsters, like especially like Swamp Mirror, Slime, and Quantum Cat, they don't have effects at all really, so they're not very good, but I will say watch out for better trap monsters coming in the future of speed duels, which could make this skill actually be played in the future, especially if we ever go into a meta where Jinzo becomes like very low level of play, because right now it could still see play a lot in something like Spellproof or Conflict decks. But if we ever get to a point where that's not the case and you get those better trap monsters like the Tikis or the Anguish Pattern, then this skill actually has a lot of future potential as well. And I haven't said that about a lot of skills in the new skills in this box. Like, they're either good now or they probably won't be good ever, but this particular Odion skill has future potential, so just be on the lookout for that.
Well, I'll just say that one of the nice parts about this deck, like, I mean, I think we agree that, is this top tier at the moment? Almost definitely not. But what's cool is that it does offer flexibility in how you want to build it. Like right now we have this concept, we have the one blowback. It might be correct to run more tribute monsters, right? Because you have so much tribute fodder, so that is something that you could look at. Then there's also the idea of something like creature swap. If you have your 0 attack trap monsters, swapping them to your opponent isn't necessarily a bad idea. So there's a lot of different ways you can play this deck. You can add more trap monsters, you can take some out, if you don't like that. There's a lot of different ways to try to play a deck like this, and any skill that just lets you kind of +1 every turn is pretty neat, and as you said, has a lot of potential.
Yeah, it's got a lot of future potential. I really like the creature swap idea because that allows you to even play something like Quantum Cat, and it gives you a better win con, which is to just use your opponent's monsters instead of their own if they're playing a bunch of boss monsters. Tributes is cool as well, where you can just like swarm your field with trap monsters and then go ahead and tribute them off. Here's a funny thing, because you are drawing a lot. Were you going to say that?
I just thought about Obelisk, yes.
Yeah, so you could play the best Egyptian god card, Don't Fight Me, is Obelisk the Tormentor, and because you have so much tribute fodder, like Justice said, maybe that's what you take out the wheel for, is even more tribute fodder, and your win con is actually just Obelisk. So something to think about there, something to chew on. I don't know if it'll be consistent, but it could be a really fun deck to play if nothing else. So I think that's all we've got here, and I think that's actually all for Justice, as the next deck is going to be the Masked Beast deck with Lumis and Umbra and the skill we got for them. And that's actually going to have to be a Lucas Gaylord deck, because that deck is a Gaylord special in that he made it and he actually topped a tournament with it. So if I didn't have him on to talk about that deck, it would be an absolute crime. So sorry, Justice, but you get to miss out on that one.
You know what? I completely agree with you, and I think that's absolutely right. And I can't wait to see that part of it.
All right, well, I guess thanks again, Justice, for being here, and I guess that's Justice signing off.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So here we are, ready to talk about the Spell of Mask skill we got for Lumis and Umbra, and unfortunately Lucas was not able to be here because something came up, his schedule got busy, and so in order for the video to not be too long before it comes out, I'm just going to go ahead and do this by myself. I have talked to him about everything that he wanted to talk about. I have his deck, so it won't be as good as it could be, but I will do my best. So here's Spell of Mask. We've got a Lumis and Umbra skill. It is, you got to activate the following skills. If a ritual summon Masked Beast is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon Masked Beast Discardius from hand deck or graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions. So that seems good, right? Because Masked Beast is a big monster, and if it gets destroyed, it allows you to automatically float into a Masked Beast Discardius, ignoring its summoning conditions from anywhere. And then the second part of the skill is you tribute a Masked Beast Discardius and then add a Masked Beast and Curse of the Masked Beast, which is a ritual spell, from your deck and or graveyard to your hand. Now that second one is nowhere near as good. Like, I think you would probably want to keep your Masked Beast Discardius more often than not and put pressure on your opponent to out it, rather than just out it yourself for free and then still have to ritual summon to replace it with something else on the board. But yeah, that's, so the first part is, I think, the part that you want to focus more on. Anyway, let me go ahead and show you Lucas's deck. Alright, so here's Lucas's deck, and go through it really fast. You've got Breaker, which is excellent for back row removal. You've got your Charging Gaia and your Sphere Kuriboh, which are usually meant to be ritual materials. So your Gaia is level 7, a Sphere Kuriboh from the hand or preferably from the graveyard so that you've used it already to protect yourself, adds up to 8, and that is enough to summon your Masked Beast with your ritual Curse of the Masked Beast. You've got 2 each of those, and the reason why he felt it was okay to have 2 was because your pre-prep can go ahead and search both of those from your deck, so it's kind of like having 5 of each, and then 3 of those are just getting you both of those automatically. One thing Lucas did ask me to point out is that your Masked Beast Discardius is actually not a bad draw in this particular version of the deck, and that's because the if you draw Masked Beast Discardius, then it's good, because as long as you have the ritual spell and the Masked Beast, then it becomes the perfect ritual fodder for your monster without having to need to draw both Charging Gaia and Sphere Kuriboh. Other than that, you've just got a Widespread Ruin in there for protection once again, and you've got a Mask of Remnants for the effect of Masked Beast Discardius. When Masked Beast Discardius is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can go ahead and activate your Remnants and grab control over your opponent's monsters. So the good news there is that even if Masked Beast Discardius is attributed from the field and sent to your graveyard, or it's destroyed, it doesn't matter how it's sent to the graveyard. So Masked Beast Discardius will trigger off of something like Hakuna Vulture Evolution. It will trigger off of your opponent taking it with Conflict and then tributing it for their own monster. Now you just take the monster that they tributed. So that's the good news about having Masked Beast Discardius. And then the Masked Beast ritual spell is really just to be a initial threat and help you get that Masked Beast Discardius out. Let's look at the side deck here. You've got Cosmic Cyclone, in case there's more back row to worry about. You've got Lost Wind, in case there are special summon monsters that are stronger than your Masked Beast or Masked Beast Discardius. So like Moth is better than Masked Beast, so that the opponent would not have to use a card effect in that scenario. Valkyrion, same thing. Same thing with Masked Beast Discardius. Also, although you're not really worried about protecting that as much, unless your opponent also has a way to remove the Mask of Remnants. Lost Wind is just also something to watch out for, and that's why Cosmic Cyclone is good to side deck, as well as Breaker is good in the main deck, because your Lost Wind is going to go ahead and cut either your Mass Beast or your Death Guardian's attack in half, and that could be really troublesome because people are playing and mostly siding Lost Wind specifically for XYZ Dragon Cannon, and not for this. Now, speaking of XYZ Dragon Cannon, now quickly, there are 2 more protection traps in the side deck here, but that's just for general protection. Now, as for the XYZ Dragon Cannon, like I was talking about, that's your best matchup here, because your skill triggers when your Mass Beast is destroyed by a card effect. That way, XYZ decks have only card effect destruction as their way to get over a 3200 monster. Now, their only other way would be that if they put your Mass Beast into defense mode and then run it over with, but it's far more likely that they're going to use a card effect destruction, one of their fusion monster effect destructions. Now, obviously, if your Mass Beast is face up, the only way that they can destroy it would be their XYZ Dragon Cannon, their big boss monster. If they do that, you go into Death Guardians, and if they do go ahead and destroy that one as well, now you've got control of their XYZ Dragon Cannon, and it's no longer theirs. They can no longer use its effect. It's yours now. So, very good matchup against XYZ Dragon Cannon, and that's actually how Lucas was able to top. I am personally worried about the matchup against Conflict. And that's just because they take your Mass Beast and they tribute it, and now you've got no out. Conflict will also usually run Sphere Kuribo, so they can Sphere Kuribo your Mass Beast, and the defense is only 1800, and then if you can't protect it, they'll just run it over by battle, and your skill does not trigger that way either. So those are 2 things to be concerned about, is either them running it over, a defense mode Mass Beast over in battle, or something like the Kiron running it over, which is why you have so much protection, and you have even more protection in your side deck here. For against special summon monsters, Lost Wind works, and then Mirror Wall and Widespread Ruin, of course, work as well. So that's the deck. Those are the matchups. That's what you need to be afraid of. And one last thing on this deck is I actually have a version of my own I've been working on, and this one has not been tested. So fair warning there. Oops, that shouldn't be there. Fair warning there. This deck has not been tested. It's just something that I personally have been working on. So I've still got the breakers. I have 3 copies of the Curse of the Mass Beast and the Mass Beast. And Lucas said that he would maybe do this too if he was to make one change, because a reason he lost one of his matches was that pre-prep came late game to him, and it was a dead draw in that late game. Now, another thing I'm doing is I'm going all in on the Allure of Darkness in this deck, because I really want to draw Ritual Raven. Now, this is a new card we got. Now, Ritual Raven is if you summon exactly 1 dark monster, this card can be used as the entire requirement. So yeah, Mass Beast is a dark monster, so you can use just Ritual Raven as your entire ritual fodder, which is why this is the version I kind of wanted to try out. Ignore my side deck that's still like completely under construction. You probably want to use the side deck Lucas used. But yeah, this is just another like version depending more on Ritual Raven rather than having Charging Gaia or Sphere Kuribo. Now again, one very obvious weakness with this deck is you probably want to add some form of protection, but obviously this is just kind of, I tried to make like a pure core version of the deck using Ritual Raven just to show you what it's like. So that's Mass Beast, that's Spell of Mask. It's probably not going to be competitive or top tier or even rogue, but it's probably going to be a fun deck to play. It's anime relevant, so you know that always adds a sense of nostalgia to it. So use these decks, make them better, and have some fun. Let's actually move on to our last couple of things I want to talk about here before we end the box review series. Alright, so we have our second last skill that I'm going to talk about here. The first one is Power of Friendship. It is the introduction of one Taya Gardner to speed duels, and her skill is simply you take no effect damage from your opponent's card effects during your turn. Just as far as I can think of, it only protects you from Zoma and Lava Golem, and I can't really think of anything that like directly and specifically only does damage to you on your turn. So in that sense, there's not much like meta relevance to this card. Like, I mean, you could make the argument like, oh, now your opponent can't special summon Gravekeeper's Curse on your turn. They have to wait till theirs if they want the burn damage. But, I mean, that's not a reason to play this skill. Neither is, I think, strictly avoiding Zoma and Lava Golem unless your opponent is running 3 of each and relying on just that combo to win the game, in which case the combo works anyway because the combo is Zoma attacking Lava Golem on their turn. Anyway, I don't think this skill is good enough anti-burn to be an auto side, even if burn is somehow meta, which it really doesn't look like it will be, but maybe in the future. Although I still doubt it. It just depends on what kind of effects we get. Like, you know, obviously if Magic Cylinder was printed and played at 3 everywhere, but then you still already have more than enough back row hate in the card pool already where this wouldn't be needed. So I don't think it's good. I don't think it's going to be needed. But hey, you know, let me know if you think otherwise. And now, unfortunately, all good things must come to pass. And so, we have made it to the end. To the end of this review series, and that we have our final skill leading into one final deck, and the final skill is Rise of the Fallen. Rise of the Fallen is a fairy skill. We did get quite a few fairies in this deck, and it's a skill you activate in your main phase. You special summon a level 4 or lower fairy monster from your graveyard in defense, and you gain LP equal to its original attack. This skill can only be used once per duel. Now, there's a lot of issues with this skill. One of them is that you have to summon the monster in defense, and that's bad because now you can't even attack with it, so it cannot even be used for some kind of an OTK. So that already slows the skill down a little bit. Now, like I said, I do have a fairy deck, kind of a fairy deck. It's barely a fairy deck. It uses the best fairy cards, the 2 best fairy cards we got, and that's it. It doesn't even use the skill. That's why I want to talk about the skill first. So another problem with the skill is that it's just not good enough because you have to set up your graveyard first off, right? And then on top of that, you, like I already said, you can't attack, so it can't even be used for aggro plays. It requires setup. It's too slow, and just in general, the power level of a skill like this, like, yeah, it gives you life points, but that's not really relevant. Like, the skills we have in speed duels, which are good, are the skills that give you a +2 or a big advantage, or takes a monster off your opponent's field and gives you a huge benefit immediately. And just special summoning one monster and having that many restrictions on it and having a pre-setup required for it, it's just not good enough. Alright, so I know I had set a deck that uses a couple of fairy cards, but it doesn't use any of these, so I wanted to shout out these cards that are potentially good. Now, Guardian Angel Joan is the biggest fairy. It's got 2800, but it requires 2 tributes in order to normal summon. It's a level 7 monster, but it has a decent effect wherever it destroys a monster by battle. You can gain life points equal to the original attack of that destroyed monster in the graveyard. It has Dimensional Alchemist, which is going to be one of these 3 that interacts with the banish pile or causes things to get banished. Now, Dimensional Alchemist is 1300, level 4, but it can actually go up to 1800 during your turn if you banish the top card of your deck. Then, when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target a banished monster and add it back to your hand. So this card was actually played in the TCG for a little bit, and I feel like this is one you should look out for to potentially have some future use here, depending on how the meta shifts and evolves as we go forward in speed duels, and if something like this could actually be very useful to go ahead and banish monsters and get them back. Although I fear it's just already too slow. Like, we got it kind of too late when speed duels has already gotten like past it already, but the meta could obviously slow down in the future. We've got Banisher of the Light, which is just a 2000 wall, but it says that any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead, so it's basically your Macrocosmos on legs. Banisher of the Radiance is the same thing, except instead of being a 2000 defense monster, it is a 1600 attack monster, so Banisher can be more aggressive. It has the potential to do that, and what's already good about something like Banisher of the Radiance is it negates anything that activates at the graveyard. So floaters like Giant Rat and Apprentice Magician will be negated if you have Banisher on the field, and you can go ahead and destroy them by battle during that time. Also, Sphere Karibo has a requirement that it must be sent from your hand to the graveyard specifically in order to activate. So if Banisher of the Radiance is out, then Sphere Kuriboh actually cannot be used by your opponent to block your attacks. Obviously your own Sphere Kuribos couldn't be used either, but you probably wouldn't be planning on that if you were to summon Banisher. So once again, these cards, Banisher, Light, and Radiance, but more specifically, I think Radiance, because it can actually swing in for damage while it's being kind of anti-meta, and that if the meta becomes heavily graveyard reliant at any point in speed duels, then Banisher of the Radiance could come in and be a solid anti-meta side deck choice. So, like, you can already tell it's good against things like Relinquish, the Relinquish loop, which relies on the cards being in the graveyard in order to loop. It relies on, it's good against XYZ Dragon Cannon, which is reliant on those XYZ pieces being in the graveyard in order to use Union Combination to go ahead and banish them from the graveyard to summon them. You have got things like Delta the Magnet Warrior, which relies on Magnet Warriors being in your graveyard in order to go into Valkyrion. So there's already, like, you can see some use for Banisher of the Radiance, but it's not as prevalent as it could be in a future meta where there's, like, you know, 2 or 3 different top tier decks which all rely on the graveyard, right? So like another example is all zombie type decks. So if zombies ever become like really good in speed duels in the future, like right now I guess they're okay, and they're not amazing, but they're not bad either. But if zombies become good at some point in the future of speed duels, then Banisher of the Radiance could come in as the perfect side deck choice against zombies. So that's fairies, and let me show you the little deck I have, which uses 2 of the best fairy cards which I have not shown yet. Okay, so I actually have a replay for you this time, and let me show you how this deck kind of works. So the skill I'll tell you is Inner Conflict, so that'll already give you more options. So here, if you're going first, obviously you can just set your Floodgate and your Cosmic, and make the patient play if you want. Or if you see that your opponent is not playing a skill that could punish you for making a aggro sort of set up your board play, then you can go ahead and do that as well. You special summon that Parshath using the Valhalla Hall of the Fallen. Now these are the 2 best fairy cards I was talking about, where Valhalla is, if you control no monsters, you can just drop a special summon a fairy from your hand. And Air Knight Parshath is very cool. It's level 5, so usually needs 1 tribute, which is why I play Conflict. But if it does piercing damage, and on top of that, if it does any battle damage to your opponent, you draw a card. So let's say I wanted to make the patient play there, and my opponent summons a monster. I Floodgate it. They have a back row, I Cosmic it. I draw. Look at that. That is so good. So now you've got Soul Exchange as an option to tribute their monster to summon your Parshath. You've got Conflict as an option to take their monster, tribute it to summon your Parshath. Or you just got Valhalla to summon your Parshath, do piercing damage, and draw a card. Now you drew another Valhalla, but that's fine. That's why you have extra draw power in Parshath, so that you can potentially draw out the cards that you're not going to need. You're not going to love drawing them later. Let's say your Parshath gets outed. No, alright, you draw. Oh look, Blowback Dragon. So now you can do either Soul Exchange or Conflict with Blowback Dragon if your opponent summoned a monster. If they didn't, you're probably fine to just wait it out and wait for another turn. So a lot of good stuff in this deck, and let me just show you the full deck. Alright, so here is the full deck. It's a very simple sort of like core deck, meant to do really 2 things. One is summon Parshath, and the other is to put your opponent's monsters in face down defense. So I've got Blowback Dragon in here as well because, like I said, the skill is Inner Conflict. So you can do a variety of things to summon both of these, your boss monsters. You've got your Conflict, obviously. You've got your Soul Exchange, which works with either one. And you've got Valhalla, which works with special summoning your Parshath onto the board. Now, if you get the perfect hand, you can potentially, like, Valhalla into Parshath and then use Conflict to Blowback Dragon as well. So the deck really has a chance to go off if you get the perfect hand. And then Sphere Kuriboh is another way to put your opponent's monsters into defense if they try to attack over your Parshath. Book of Moon and Floodgate do that as well. And Sphere Kuriboh, I have 3 of those and not 3 of the others, because Sphere Kuriboh works on anything. Now, whether that's a Spellproof Jinzo or a Spell Canceller or whatever, it can put anything into defense mode. You've also got 3 Cosmic Cyclones to get rid of their back row, because back row can be a potential weakness for this deck. Now, taking a quick look at the side deck here, I've got Banisher of the Radiance. Now, this is perfect in case your opponent has a graveyard-centered strategy. Banisher of the Radiance will put a stop to that real quick. So it's a perfect side deck, especially since it goes synergizes well with your Valhalla. You've got Jinzo, in case your opponent is relying a lot on traps and your Cosmic Cyclones aren't necessarily enough. You throw in the Jinzo, you make a conflict Jinzo play possible for yourself. And also remember, your Banisher is 1600, so if you can throw these two in together, that can potentially set up an OTK for you. You've got your Sword of Poison to just power up your Parshath. 3800 Piercer is really good. Another Floodgate in case you feel like traps really work well on your opponent and you can really put them more into defense by doing that. This would work particularly well in my mind against something that uses Spellproof Armor and the Colossalis, the big bird, 2300. Mirror Wall is for similar stuff, so your Parshath is 1900, you can go ahead and put a big protection on it with the Mirror Wall, and then if you do damage step Mirror Wall, Parshath also draws a card. Another thing you can do for similar effect is if your opponent is attacking into your Parshath as their way of killing it, you can also shrink. You shrink in the side deck and you can go ahead and use that to kill their monster in order to draw a card on their turn. So the deck is all about tribute summoning and draw power. If you can think of a way to make it better, obviously this is not optimized, go for it. Let me know your ideas. Anyway guys, that's it. We've made it to the end of the Battle City Box video review series. Is there something you think I left out? I didn't talk about every single card just because I only talked about the cards that I think could potentially be relevant, or you could potentially make at least a halfway decent or a fun deck out of. Now, if you still think there's something I left out, something you'd want me to talk about in the future, go ahead and let me know, and I will try my best to do that. Other than that, let me know what you think of the Battle City Box. What your thoughts on it are, what your early predictions are for what decks are going to be good, what decks are not. And I hope you enjoy that one particular thing I did with this video, which is to go ahead and cut it down into sections so that you can know exactly if you want to skip around in it or watch any one particular part. You can go ahead and do that, and I'm going to be doing that for all videos in the future from now on. So for those of you who might have wanted that earlier, sorry I didn't do that before. But anyway, I'm going to ask you today to subscribe if you've made it this late into the video. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Nothing motivates me more to keep going than to see there are more subscribers. Until then guys, I will see you for the next video. Terra Master out.